filmmaker.com. James has dedicated his life to uncovering the truth behind nutrition and natural healing. He's inspired millions around the world to heal their bodies naturally, lose excess pounds, and get their lives back on track through his films and guided programs. Alongside Laurentine ten Bosch, he is on a mission to help people get essential free and natural tools to take charge of their health and life. And you can listen to his latest nutrition masterclass at foodmatters.com/masterclass. And with all that said, and much more that could be said about all that he has done, hello, James, and welcome to Younger Longer.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great today. So, James, you know well that one golden key to living long and well is to get plenty of laughter and joy. Mm-hmm. And toward that end, I like to put my conversations with today's top experts like yourself in imagined scenarios for everyone listening. And for this summit, focused on the top experts' most effective steps to live long and well, I'm going for the ultimate imagined scenarios, which is each speaker's favorite travel location. Now, you previously told me yours is the very place where you once visited and now live with your family, Vanuatu, which is a small Pacific island country about 2,200 miles from Australia. I do know the total population is under about 300,000 people. Now, like most people, I've never been there, but oh, wow. Judging from all the pictures, it is a paradise of white sands and turquoise waters. So, James, can you perhaps just briefly share what it is about Vanuatu that you love?
Well, it's an honor to be here, really, with these people. But what I love so much about Vanuatu is, I guess its geographical isolation has preserved so much of an indigenous culture in the world. And I think we don't see that as much anymore in the developed world. Most of the world has seen the hand of development through agriculture and processed foods. And there's very few pockets of people living like we have done for thousands of years. And it's only in the last few hundred years that we've dramatically changed the way that we live, eat, and interact. So to live in this place, in Vanuatu, it feels like I'm reconnecting with an ancient part of how we've lived for so many years. And that, combined with my research and the films that we've produced over the last 15 years, it's a really interesting coalescing of experiences, and it's just so wonderful to be here. And of course, fresh coconuts, papaya, beautiful root vegetables like manioc, taro, yam. It's just a very abundant place in terms of nutrition as well. So very blessed.
Well, like I said, it sounds like a paradise. I saw the pictures. It looks like a paradise. And in reality, I do have to visit you there someday.
Please come.
Soon.
Please come.
All right. But for the purposes of this conversation, I'm going to have to downscale that a bit and imagine I'm visiting you there in Vanuatu. And let's just say we got down in one of those pools, and we just got done swimming in one of the thousands, I hear, of these stunning sky blue natural swimming pools that, again, I've only seen in pictures, and they're hiding behind these massive banyan trees. And man, that would be worth it right there alone. So let's say we've done that. We're on the shore taking a rest, and it's the perfect place, James, to ask you a big question I've been meaning to ask. I say, hey, James, from your unique area of expertise, what are 3 to 5 of the simple and most effective steps people can take to look and feel their best, avoid and possibly even overcome disease and live longer and better? What would your first answer be, James?
Well, powerful question, and one that could occupy months of conversation. But for the purpose of this interview, the compressed version is, and this conversation by the banyan tree and the blue hole, is about making it concise. And I think to answer this question, Brian, I'd like to offer some form of a thesis to hang our coat hooks on, so to speak. And really, when I speak about a thesis, I mean a few different things. One is the fact that we know that as a body, as a human body, as a human entity, we are a combination of essentially cells and bacteria. And they're all collaborating in this myriad of complex and dynamic ways, which boggles the mind. I mean, circa 7 trillion cells, and it's simply through different vibratory patterns that they coalesce and connect in different forms and create organs in the body and serve different functions. And then we have bacteria as well. So if we break our body down into a collection of cells and bacteria, then we start to see how do we nourish that system as effectively as possible to maintain long-term health and vibrancy into our 90s, hundreds plus, even living beyond 100, and many people have done that in good health. Laurentine, my wife, her grandmother lived to 103, sharp as a tack, and she was very, very onto it and supremely healthy right up until her last days. And there are things that I noticed from her life as well that I'll talk about today. But when we look at cellular health in particular, and the bacteria is sort of a side project of cellular health. If you look after the cells, then the bacteria get looked after as well, in a way. So cells need essentially three things to thrive. They need oxygen, nutrients, and the ability to detoxify. And this is quite simple, and yet we've done a really good job at not looking after ourselves in the modern world. And everything we do, from modern agriculture to the pesticides and insecticides that we spray on our crops, which are really reimagined toxins from, biological warfare from World War I and II.
Yeah.
And what we've really done, and then the processing of foods and the extraction of these high octane sugars like high fructose corn syrup and putting that into sugary drinks and just literally injecting that directly into our bloodstream, causing all these issues. We are doing ourselves our own damage. And if we break down our health into cellular health, this concept, this thesis, this idea, we can really start to simplify the way that we make decisions on a day-to-day basis, what to eat, what to avoid, energetic situations to put ourselves into and to avoid. But today I want to focus more on food because that's my core area of expertise, and I realize there are so many non-food components that are important for longevity. And, they're covered by great researchers in Blue Zone research, a lot about community, laughter, connection, a sense of worth and value, living in multi-generational homes, although that can be stressful, but that seems to be correlated with longevity as well, which is typically a developing country or an indigenous type concept, which you also see here in Vanuatu. They call it a Wontok system. So if you build a house, Brian, your uncles, brothers, sisters, aunties, whoever has every right to just come and live with you without asking.
Wow.
So that doesn't exist in the West, but it exists here. And it's actually quite powerful. Anything you have, actually, anybody that's half loosely related to you has full right to use at any time they so desire. So there are other components. But if we get back to this component of cellular health, I think we start to look at oxygen, nutrients, and the ability to detoxify. And I want to start with that last point. And I want to marry that to the first part of your day, which is when you wake up in the morning. So your ability to detoxify and when you wake up in the morning. Now, as a species, we've come up with this great name for the first meal of the day, and it's called breakfast. And what that actually stands for is breaking your fast. And so in the evening, we don't eat. Typically, we should eat reasonably early and moderately and before the sunset, and then we sleep and we have this nice period of not eating during the nighttime. And this is a process that our body goes into called rest, digest, repair. And this is a parasympathetic function of the body. We're breathing gently in our diaphragm in the evening, as long as we're not having any nightmares, let's hope. And so our body goes into this miraculous state of fixing itself, repairing things, and doing all this wonderful work. Now, if you wake up in the middle of the night and snack on crisps, and you're ruining this, right? And if you eat too late or too heavy or too much meat or too much processed food, you're also ruining this magical process. So it's important to realize that. And then you have this period of not eating. And there's so much research now around intermittent fasting and going for periods without food. And naturally, we have had these periods without food as a species. And even naturally, living with Indigenous people here, there is just natural food shortages, and there's not always that available because you have to go to your garden to get food instead of the supermarket. And so that takes time. So we're back at breakfast, which is break your fast. Now, the body requires, for supreme health and longevity and preventing disease, for all these functions, it requires the ability to be able to detoxify. So our bodies naturally accumulate toxins. They accumulate toxins, just metabolite toxins, through the process of metabolizing food in the evening at night. So that accumulates in the body. We also have acidosis, acid buildup in the body, just through natural processes of digestion. And also if we've been eating too many acidic foods like sugary foods or meat foods or dairy, we build up acids in the body. So in the morning, our body is looking to detoxify. It naturally wants to detoxify. You wake up and you generally go to the toilet. There's things that your body do. And there's primary elimination systems of the body require one core thing, and that is water and hydration.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at your detoxification systems, the way that the body naturally rids itself of toxins, and again, this is one of the core elements of what your cells need to thrive, of which you are cells. Water is required for that process. So you think about doing a number 2 on the toilet, you need water for that. People are not drinking enough water. They wake up in the morning and they're having coffee, which is diuretic, which is even stripping more water out of the body and inhibiting the body's natural capability to detoxify. So the body needs water to do a number 2. The body needs water to do a number 1 on the toilet. Of course, if there's not enough water, it's too yellow, and you need that to be diluted to pass these toxins out. The other way that we detoxify is through sweat. And so that comes out through the skin, and that's liquid. And the other way we do it is through our breath. And if you breathe onto a window pane, you notice there's a condensation there. So there's also a water element with that. So our bodies require water to detoxify. So the first thing I want you to do in the morning when you wake up is to hydrate your body sufficiently with a beautiful big glass of room temperature, spring or filtered water. And that is so powerful. Now, there's other things you can do to that water. You can add in a green powder of some form, or you can add in a little bit of lemon juice. Lemon juice is really powerful for breaking down mucus in the body. It's also powerful for restoring that alkaline environment where we spoke briefly just about the acid buildup that can happen in the evenings. So that is really powerful. You can add some apple cider vinegar, some people do. Some people like to drink it through a straw so it doesn't, affect the enamel on their teeth. But, if you drink it fast, you can get it past there. There's different things you can do to your water as well to make it a little bit more exciting, Or alternatively, you can juice green vegetables. So extract the liquid nutrition out of green vegetables, super powerful in the morning. So this is what I want you to do before eating anything else. Now, even if you eat a standard diet, start with water, and focus on adding in this particular part of the conversation. There's a few things I want to talk about as we get to other points in terms of extracting out of our diet because they are causing a lot of harm. But I want to focus at this point just on adding. So hydration, hydration, hydration. And this really deeply supports the detoxification component of our well-being and of our cellular health. And then as well throughout the day, drinking before meals and after, ideally not with meals. You don't want to dilute your digestive enzymes and your digestive capability. But keeping your water intake up, eating high water content foods, first thing in the morning, drinking water. And I think that is such a simple, profound, powerful, cheap, almost free concept that anybody can grasp, and it ties straight into this cellular health idea. So that's where I'd start, Brian.
Yes, a great place to start indeed, James. Thank you. And, several studies have shown only around 20% of adults here in the U.S. drink enough water every day. In one study not long ago, the top reason cited for not drinking enough was that they only drink when they're thirsty. So it sounds like a very good idea to make it a habit, such as in the morning and at other key times to ensure you, as you put it, hydrate. And I personally love it with a bit of lemon juice, by the way. It's a very simple step that can add in the benefits you noted. Plus that lemon juice provides vitamin C and its benefits, of course. And research shows it can also be really helpful for attractive looking skin. And it may help prevent kidney stones and possibly even help with weight loss. Okay, James, let me shift gears just slightly here. Still on the topic of cellular health, of course, but you mentioned intermittent periods of going without food and indigenous people. And you've done so much research over the years. You've traveled the world, done so many interviews for your wonderful films, and have a global perspective, including indigenous people. And while some people tend to think of intermittent fasting as some new or faddish thing, and some may consider it even as something not normal at all, isn't intermittent fasting just the way of life in so many of these cultures, as it's been for eons. Even if they don't have a special name for it like we do, isn't it just the human norm?
Well, Brian, it's really great that you asked this, because I've literally been more so now than ever before experiencing it. I mean, mostly for the last 15 years, I've been traveling between Australia and the US and Europe, and occasionally stopping in Vanuatu or Fiji or some remote places. But if I think back 3 or 4 nights ago, myself, Laurentine and Hugo and Rungi, we all walked down the road here there's a big banyan tree at the end of the road here, and there's a small night market where the mamas bring some food together where people eat. Now, there's a couple of things that naturally impart fasting into the indigenous world. One is electricity. So it's not very common to have much lighting in a village at nighttime. There'll be small solar lights and small panels. So that essentially means that you sort of eat closer to sunset, because you need the light to cook, and then you need some sort of light to see. And then as it gets darker, then people are sort of turning off, and they're really much more dialed into the circadian rhythm of life. Whereas us, with our screens and our TVs and our computers and our lights inside and our never, ever, ever ending electricity supply, courtesy of fossilized dinosaurs, we are really out of sync in many ways. And so that natural, I guess, restricted access to energy forces an earlier dinner time and an earlier food preparation time. So the mamas will be preparing food from the late afternoon, early afternoon onwards, and it'll be ready for that sort of 5, 6 p.m. sort of time. And then people eat and they generally go to bed. There's also a natural sort of plant medicine drink that some of the men and women also may have earlier on at 4 or 5 p.m., which is kava. It's a ground up root, and it's a very powerful, relaxing medicine. Plant medicine, anti-anxiety, and also a little bit of an appetite suppressant. So your evening meal becomes not so large. Then they sort of head to sleep and rest. And in the mornings, breakfast is, from an indigenous perspective, the breakfasts here are very light, if at all. It's water or some coconut water or a small amount of fruit, but typically they won't have that till mid-morning. And then they'll have a large lunch and a large dinner. And unfortunately, in the city areas, some other places near us, there's more things like breakfast crackers and like teas and sugar and milk coming in. And this is having a supremely deleterious effect on many of the people here, because they've had so many thousands of years of supreme purity. And then all of a sudden it's like gluten, sugar, dairy, and it's like instantaneous diabetes, obesity, and heart disease. And you see it. But then many of the culture here are still very much living a powerful, beautiful subsistence lifestyle and thriving in a way physically from that. And then we might look from a Western perspective and say, well, they're not thriving economically, or they don't have international travel, or they don't have 2 cars, or they can barely afford school fees. But like, what matters more? Community, health. I mean, when somebody loses their health, that's the only goal they've got, right? Is to get their health back. But when they have their health, they got 1,000 goals. So I think we're degrading community and connection in the developed world, where there's a degradation of our food and our food quality, but there's a mass increase in our material wealth. And so I think we need to just start to take the best of both worlds, right, Brian? Absolutely. And maybe say, well, how much do we really need? Yeah. And then how can we more appropriate towards an indigenous natural way of living? So to answer your question, it's a really natural form of intermittent fasting that just seems almost seamlessly built into the natural world for them, for these incredible people. They call them the Ni Vanuatu people. And so it's a natural process for them. It's not practiced. It's not like, oh, are you intermittent fasting
right
today?
Exactly.
It's just what it is. It's just what it is.
Right.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah. Excellent. Appreciate that. So let's go there in our imagined scenario for this important conversation, James. I've done some of my homework, and let's say we've trekked to the Vanuatu island of, I think it's pronounced Tana.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, Tana, yeah.
And it's home to native peoples called the Kegel tribe. Now, from what I read, they have barely changed over many centuries. They're still growing their old crops in the old way. They wear these traditional grass skirts. They, of course, have little to no TV, no Wi-Fi, from what I've heard. So maybe we're wearing grass skirts too, just to fit in better. Who knows? And maybe they even invited us into one of their traditional dances. Okay, now we're taking a break from that. This is an ideal opportunity, James, to ask you your next simple and most effective step to live long and well.
Okay, here we go. This is actually going to be talking about something that I've witnessed come into this culture. And there's essentially two groups of people now, one who eat this product and another group of people who don't eat this product. And the people who do eat this product are experiencing obesity, weight gain, heart disease issues, skin issues, many of the issues we're experiencing as in the West. And the people who don't eat these products are not experiencing these issues. And I see this, I've seen it on Tana, I've seen it on Afate, the island I'm on. When you take a pure indigenous person, now we have to think of ourselves as well, Brian, you and I, as pure indigenous people. It's just that in the last few hundred years, we've sort of changed so dramatically. It's hard for us to even imagine that, right? We've become so domesticated, so of the household, so detached from nature that we are just so like, and even we think, oh, I'm recycling now. And I have a green juice, I'm so natural. You're not even close. You come to Tana with me and I'll show you natural, right? Grass skirt, barefoot, no electricity. That's like pure nature. But it's unimaginable. But one thing to witness so powerfully is that this one group of these powerfully indigenous people that have thrived for thousands of years in this remote environment start eating this product and in a very short period of time experience very deleterious effects on their health. And then the other group who didn't eat this product don't have any problems whatsoever. And I think it's so telling for what's happening in the West. And this product is, drumroll, wheat, modern wheat.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And it's so telling here. So in the West, it's hard to see because we're all sort of eating it, we're all sort of bathed in this modern world of mass monocropped wheat. And this is something I sort of dove deep on in the last few years, especially with our latest docuseries Transcendence, interviewing people like William Davis and Dr. Perlmutter and all these great scientists that have done so much deep research on this. And wheat is not great for our bacteria, and it's not great for our cells, and it's not great for our guts because of how we've changed it. And it's no longer what it used to be. I mean, wheat used to be a few meter high grass. We'd harvest it in small amounts, prepare it in a natural indigenous way, soaking, fermenting, cooking, these types of things. But we changed wheat in order to make it easier for us to harvest. And we did that in very rudimentary ways that predated genetic engineering. So genetic engineering, you use gene splicing techniques and you shoot particular genes expressions with gamma rays into these seeds to impart, new characteristics into a plant. But predating that, we were just splicing things together and seeing what happened. Maybe it wouldn't work, maybe it did work, and we kept doing that. And that's how we essentially came up with this semi-dwarf modern wheat variety, which is a sort of a high gluten, short, stocky wheat. And what that is good for is our huge combine harvesters that can harvest it in mass. And then we also, before we harvest it, we spray it with glyphosate, which is a toxic chemical, to help dry it out as a desiccant, so it makes it easier to harvest. So we've got this toxic, dry, genetically modified with archaic modification techniques, wheat that's now permeated our mass food supply, and even the most remote parts of the world now are consuming this product. So it comes here in the form of 2-minute noodles. It comes here in the form of breakfast crackers or these small crackers. It comes here in the form of bread. So they import flour and they make bread. As I've started to witness people, and this is a mixture of anecdotal and empirical research coming together. So the research is telling us all these facts. You can watch the films, you can listen to the interviews. I'm sure you got people on this podcast talking about, and this summit talking about these problems. But now I stand here and I actually witness it. And I see people in a short period of time, 1 generation or 2 generations, start to eat this product on a regular basis. And instantaneously, you've got diabetes, obesity, you have leg amputations, you have macular degenerations, you're losing eyesight. And you see men on the side of the road in a wheelchair and they've got no leg. And they call it sick blood sugar. This is sick from sugar. And it's known here, and the hospitals know it. And yet there's people that don't eat wheat and they don't have any of these problems, Brian. And so this couldn't be more obvious to me and to us now sitting in our grass skirts with the Lanacol tribe in Tunna. But this is so powerful. And so therefore, eliminating this product is such a powerful longevity force to help support your health long term because of the myriad of ways that this modern product is damaging your health. Now, okay, what's the alternatives? Not some processed gluten-free alternative, but looking towards, on Tunna, for instance, they grow a root vegetable called manioc, or cassava as it's also known. And you can make a flour out of manioc, and it's a long root vegetable, and it's got a skin on it, and you peel it off and you grate it, or they call it rasp. You rasp this manioc, and it creates almost like a pudding, and you mix it with some coconut milk, and they create this natural type of, maybe you would call it an island bread, or you can mix vegetables with it, or sometimes some wild birds, if they catch wild birds or fish with it, they can mix it together, and they make these like little bread mixes, which they cook in banana leaves and hot stones. That's the natural root vegetable variety. So vegetables, tubers, nuts, seeds, fruits, seaweeds, herbs, superfoods, these are all part of the okay list, right? All very good. But then this particular modern crazy wheat is just not good for us. I've witnessed it firsthand. That's the next thing I want to talk about, and it must come out of people's diets if they want to live long, healthy, happy lives. Or they must learn to interact with it in a much milder way, having it far more infrequently and searching out ancient, fermented, long fermented varieties. I'm not completely gluten-free, but when I eat it, I'm looking for the organic, natural sourdough, long ferment on the rare occasions that I do eat it. But I tend towards gluten-free varieties. In particular, manioc or cassava at the moment is my favorite, and that is fantastic for me. And you can buy cassava flour. If you eat eggs, you can put an egg in there and some coconut milk, and you make beautiful pancakes, and you hardly know that you're missing out on wheat. So there's ways that you can transition and keep some form of modernity in your diet, but just taking out the wheat. And that's something that I think is so important. I've witnessed that, and I hope people can take it on board after this short conversation.
Yeah. Well, the good news is it's more so goes by the name cassava, flour here, at least where I've seen it in the States, and it's becoming more and more widely available. So
great.
And you are right. It's a great alternative. It's very close in many different preparations. It's interesting. I really can dumb this down regarding modern day wheat and gluten. Gluten is glue.
Exactly.
And really, that's what it's doing in your body, for goodness sake. It's gunking things up. It's glue. So
totally.
We could dive into the science, but we could just leave it at that.
Well, when you see the guy making the pizza dough at a restaurant or the man making the bread and they pull it apart and it sticks together, it's like a rubber. That's the gluten, the sticking it, which is this protein which makes it stick together. Now you take another flour, like a rice flour or this manioc flour, cassava flour, which is my preference, a root vegetable flour, and you pull it apart, it doesn't stick together like that. It sort of falls apart. And so that sort of shows us that it's the gluten that makes that stickiness, but it's also the gluten that makes it highly addictive. A high sugar hit, because these highly processed refined carbohydrates give us a huge sugar spike, which causes this sense of lighting the brain up, addiction sort of component. It's a wildly dangerous product. Bread, with the stuff of life, right? What we built civilizations on has become this like silent killer. And I don't really have anything against super ancient, soaked, fermented, naturally prepared, and in a small amount type of bread. And there's long-lived people around the world that do have bread in their diets. I don't want to make bread evil. I just want to say modern wheat and the way we're doing it right now is super evil, and we need to reinvent the way that we interact with wheat or any grain in that particular fashion, and also maybe look at more root vegetable flours because they are more powerful and more nutritious for us.
Well, thank you, James. And the last thing I'll say on this is that when I greatly reduced the modern day wheat, it made a very fast and positive change in how I felt, in my brain clarity, energy levels, and more.
Amazing.
If you haven't tried it already, folks, consider trying it. You'll likely love how it makes you feel, and that's your body telling you James is right. So, okay then, James, in our imagined location for this very real and very important discussion. We're wandering about the islands of Vanuatu. There's a famous location there for diving called Million Dollar Point. After World War II, the U.S. military dumped millions of dollars worth of jeeps and tanks in the waters there just off the coast, and it's become a home to sea life and a popular place to dive. So let's say we just got done doing a dive together there, and now we're sitting on the beach taking a rest, and it's the perfect time to ask you your next most effective step to live long and well.
Fantastic, Brian. I'm happy to have that beautiful dive with you at Million Dollar Point. And we're sitting on the beach, and I'm opening a coconut, Brian. And we open this coconut, and we drink it, and it's beautiful. And then we see an old coconut on the ground. These old coconuts, some of them even sprout into young trees, and they're maybe a foot or two high, and there's a small tree coming out. And it's still the coconut sitting on the ground. There's some small roots coming out into the soil and a small tree. And I pull this tree just gently, and the roots lift out of the ground. And so I have this coconut, which is sort of brown and old at this stage, with these small roots coming out and a green tree coming out with 2 or 3 leaves on it. And I take this, and maybe I've got a knife. Everyone has a knife here. Even schools, they send out notifications saying, make sure to bring your knife to school. Can you imagine that in America?
No, the notifications are the exact opposite.
It's the opposite, right? You get an x-ray and it's like, take no knives, no guns. But here, I mean, everyone has a knife. I mean, I look out my window here. I've got it closed so that there's not much noise, but there's just people with knives, big knives all the time. And you need it. It's a tool for harvesting food and staying alive and being human. We sort of forgot that. So I've got a knife, and there's this coconut here, and I turn my knife around. So I use the back side of the knife, and I hold the coconut in my hand, and it looks really dangerous, but it's not so bad. And I crack the coconut a few times until the shell cracks. And as it cracks open, I've got this shell on one side, it's empty. On the other side, it's got a thick skin on it and thick flesh on the inside of the coconut. And then there's a ball, like a root ball. So the inside where there was water has turned into this fluffy ball of like coconut fairy floss. And it's absolutely divine. I mean, if you haven't eaten a coconut like this, it will change your entire life.
Really?
And yeah, and you scoop that out and you eat this. So I'm eating this with you, and it's coconut fairy floss. It is like a fluffy white and sweet, but not too sweet, the beginnings of this internal root ball of a coconut, because a coconut's a nut that's essentially just waiting to sprout and become another tree, and it's got its own water with it. I mean, nature is so intelligent, so it's got its own water with it. And in fact, coconut water is the closest liquid on planet Earth to human blood plasma, and they used to actually use it during World War II in the remote regions of the Pacific for blood transfusions where they didn't have enough blood. They just literally extract water from a coconut and inject it straight into people.
Wow.
Straight into your bloodstream. So, I mean, it's a miraculous fruit, nut, whatever we might call it, nut, really. And so I've done this, and we've eaten this part out, and then what's left are these 2 half shells with a thick meat on side of it, and we scrape along the meat there, and this beautiful oil comes off, a beautiful fat. And this fat is so nutritious and amazing, and the research on coconut oil is phenomenal. And it all points in a really positive direction, that fat is not actually bad. Fat is good. And the lauric acid in coconuts is really powerful for supporting cardiovascular health, for metabolism, for skin health, all overall systemic health. And yet we go back to the 70s and 80s, and it was like, fat is bad, we must not have fat. So we had this whole war on fat, and we transitioned from fat to processed carbohydrates, the exact thing we just spoke about before that we shouldn't eat, like biscuits, crackers, breads, etc. We're like, well, it's low fat, so it's good. Sorry, newsflash, no. Just because it's low fat doesn't mean it's good. And in fact, we need beautiful quality fats in our diet. We're most likely not getting enough. And the problem is we're most likely getting fats from sources that are causing supreme damage to our health. So again, let's go to this environment. We're sitting on the side of the beach. We're in a natural environment, in a subtropical rainforest type environment. And let's think about where our fat comes from, Brian, in that particular natural environment. You and I were in grass skirts walking around the bush, and we're eating things. So we're going to pick some tree nuts like navele, or we're going to pick a tree nut like nungai. And these, it's like a bush almond and a bush maybe hazelnut or something. So these nuts have nice fats in them as well. So we eat them, and that fat helps to support things like metabolism, satiate our hunger, so we don't just go and eat too much croissants or bread, right? Which is what we've done when we take the fat out of our diet. We've increased how much we eat because we don't feel full anymore. So we've got natural fats from our coconut. We've got natural fats from nuts and seeds. Now, if these indigenous people occasionally eat some animal products, which they do in small amounts, maybe some wild fowl or some wild fish, then there's going to be some fat component in that as well. And this is natural forms of fat. Beautiful, amazing. They exist in our diet and they're excellent and we need them. And often we're not getting enough beautiful natural fats. Now, let's look at the modern world, or let's look even what you see in the developing world where you have food being imported. What are other forms of fat and how can they be damaging? And here's the thing. We look at the problem with wheat. The problem came because we changed wheat, and we changed it to support our modern industrial food supply, which is really a modern industrial complex that we have about just more efficiency. And that's created damage to that product. So wheat is no longer harmless, beautiful, natural, 6, 8, 10, 12 foot high. It's dangerous and it's short and it's stocky and it's full of gluten. Same with oils. We have gone and mass produced agriculturally things like soy, canola, safflower, corn oils, cottonseed oil. And these vegetable oils are extracted in a way, and then they're bottled in these like golden yellow plastic bottles, in plastic as well. We've got to stop doing plastic in the world. But they're bottled in these plastic things, and then we go and we cook in them, and we deep fry in them. Soy, corn, safflower, you heat them up, and they become rancid. And when you put a rancid oil into your body, an unstable oil into your body, it causes massive issues. You have essentially oxidization. So when an oil gets heated, it becomes oxidized. And oxidization causes free radical damage in the body. And in order to fight free radicals, we need antioxidants. That's why antioxidants have gotten so much praise over the last 10, 15 years in nutrition circles. Blueberries, high in antioxidants. Fruits and vegetables, high in antioxidants. They're fighting free radicals. Well, why not put the free radicals in the first place, which are causing damage? And the big offenders when it comes to free radical damage are highly processed vegetable oils, which are just causing so much damage to our health. And then systemically, that can cause issues like heart disease. It can cause really suppression of the immune system and other issues. And we need to stop eating these products. And if I look again in this pure culture, one group of people that doesn't eat these products, another group that does. The other group that does is in and out of hospitals with all sorts of a myriad of different modern diseases, which were previously unknown in this culture for thousands of years up until 50, 70, 80, 100 years ago as these food products start to came in. So clue for the West, clue for us, clue for the developed West, we should not have these products in our diet. And I'm not the only person to say this. Many other people have. So having good quality fats, nuts and seeds, of course, amazing. More of them, Brian, and less of these modern golden plastic oils that you see in the supermarket. But they're not just in those golden plastic containers. They're in so many different processed foods. They're in sports bars. They're in all sorts of chips and deep fried products. Read the labels, avoid these vegetable oils, and get good quality fats from natural sources, just like us eating this coconut and scraping the beautiful fresh coconut fat from that and putting it on our bodies, Brian, putting it on our skin and eating it, and it's supremely powerful. So that's another point that I'd love to bring to people's attention.
Appreciate that. So basically what you're saying is wheat fried in canola oil is not good.
Well,
no carnival food.
Adjusted with sugar. I mean, it's beautiful. Yeah. Brian, it's amazing. And many people listening to this are probably addicted to it. And I have been as well. And I can be again. I mean, this product is supremely addictive. I mean, you take a deep fried bread, fluffy glutinous bread, and you cover it in sugar. In Holland, they have this product. It's called oliebollen, or these breads. They even put vegetable oils in bread these days.
Right.
And sugar. I mean, sugar's not in bread. I mean, that's cake, right? But every bread pretty much has sugar in it now, especially in the US. And I'm not making qualms with the US. I've lived there. I respect the country so much. I have so many dear friends there. My son was born there. But America, US, and the UK, we're putting sugar in bread now. Mm-hmm. So we're basically putting gluten, sugar, and vegetable oil, 3 supremely damaging products, into this one thing that we're encouraging people to eat on a daily basis, and nobody's really talking about it.
Yeah.
So when I'm here, though, and I see 2 groups of people, one eat it and the other one don't, and I see instantaneously in a short period of time, and it's so stark, the contrast, and so obvious, that it really makes it clear that we can't do this anymore. And it's clear to me, and I hope that we can, through the work that you're doing and the we're doing, we can start to raise more awareness about this.
Oh, I think we can. And yeah, they call it here, well, there's many words for it, but one of them is elephant ears. And if people go to a carnival here, you'll find elephant ears. You know, if you're in the wrong summit and you're looking for how to, you know, live a short life and not live well, I would recommend that food, because it is exactly that, James. It's wheat flour fried in some horrible oil, vegetable oil, with powdered sugar sprinkled on top. It's just,
I know, right?
One of the worst foods you could think of. But
unfortunately, Brian, it's delicious though. That's the problem.
Yeah, I was going to say, I recall, it's been a long time, but it tastes good. It's got the right mouthfeel and all that. So just avoid that is what I'm saying.
Or have it very sparsely, very sparsely. I'm not a sort of person that says, take everything out and never, ever, 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 ever have it. That's not an everyday food, Brian. That's maybe once a month, once every quarter, who knows? But I also want to be just cautious to people. I'm not about taking everything away from people. I'm just saying, become intelligently aware of the volume of a certain particular food stuff that you're consuming on a regular basis is so important if you're looking for long-term health and well-being.
Mm-hmm. Well said. All right, James, in our imagined scenario, we're having that conversation there in what is now your home, Vanuatu. And my visit would not be complete without hiking up as high as we can go, at least the world's most accessible, from what I hear, active volcano, Mount Yasser, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I heard the surface is kind of like Mars up there. And
oh my God, it's crazy.
There's this steam coming out of the ground. We can hear explosions, and I'm not actually sure this is the best circumstance to continue our conversation, but let's do it anyway there. What would your next most effective step be?
My next most effective step would be to imagine that we took those coconuts with us, Brian, okay? And we had these 2 half shells of coconut, and then we've got the meat on them still. So we ate the fairy floss out, and we've scooped the fat out, but we've still got this thick flesh, hard flesh, and this coconut in our hands. And then we're sitting up on the top of Mount Yasur, and the volcano's going off. We take a few steps back from the edge because, to be honest, it's absolutely terrifying, Brian. I was so shocked at how unsafe it was up there. I mean, the handrail was half fallen over. I mean, it's just one step in the wrong direction, you're in a liquid hot crater, right? It's just terrifying. When I visited, we actually slept in a treehouse close by, and at nighttime, the volcano would erupt and the ground would shake and the whole tree would move. These earthquakes every 30, 40 minutes, and the tree, the whole house would shake, and it's just terrifying being in its presence because you realize how insignificant you are.
Yeah, wow.
And the next thing I want to talk about is, so we take this coconut and we're sitting on top of this hill, and there's a small little breadboard with a little round steel curved section to the end of the breadboard, and you use it to rasp off the inside of this coconut, and you create a wet coconut flesh. And then you take a little bit of coconut water and you mix it with that coconut flesh and use a nut milk bag and you squeeze it out and you make a beautiful, delicious coconut milk, Brian, right? And we're up on top of this volcano. Maybe it's the morning time and you might have a tea, or, people in the West still love coffee. And I think, small amounts of coffee is probably not so bad. There's positive and negative research on it. As long as you have lots of water first thing in the morning and you don't douse your coffee in dairy and sugar, then that's okay. So say we have a small coffee break and we put this beautiful, fresh coconut milk in coffee. They actually grow coffee on Tana as well, this island where Mount Yasur is the volcano, in this volcanic rich soil. So we're having a coffee with coconut milk. We're sitting there and we're chatting, and you asked me this question. I said, well, and again, I'm going to talk about a product to exclude here, unfortunately for people, but this is going to talk about dairy. What we've done to wheat, what we've done to vegetable oils is in a little bit of a similar way what we've done to dairy. And what we've done to modern dairy production is just absolutely barbaric. and ridiculous. And I think if we have any sort of compassion for other human beings, which we're still learning how to do, to be honest, I mean, there's a lot of racism, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of we're better because we've got more money or we're this or that, in the world. And that's dying off, thank goodness. But it still exists. And we must also express that compassion to all living things. Of course, some cultures take animals for their food on an infrequent basis. And typically, they're much more in tune with their environment and they're taking them in small amounts to maintain stable supply. But with regards to dairy, we're essentially locking up these animals. We're feeding them a diet they were never designed to eat. So they're very rarely eating grass. They're eating corn, wheat, and soy, the exact products making the oils that are super damaging for us. Then those animals get sick, so they're on antibiotics and all sorts of other drugs and treatments. And then we're milking them, and then we're pasteurizing and homogenizing that milk, which is processing it further and making it more difficult for our bodies to digest. And then we're consuming that en masse with wheat in the morning. And that's called breakfast. And it's like so ludicrous, right? It seems so surreal. And these, the Alta Denta and these big milks you get in these, like, how many gallons? I don't know. They look like 2 or 3 liters to me. These huge milk containers you get in the supermarkets in the US. I mean, a dizzying volume of milk, right? And what we're doing by consuming this product in mass is we are causing all sorts of inflammation, mucus issues in our bodies. And this, again, is not a natural way of existing harmoniously with the planet. Now, that being said, if I was living in the mountains in a cold environment and I kept an animal with me and I occasionally ate raw milk or I drank raw milk in small amounts and not separating the calf and keeping that family together, and I occasionally did that, essentially what I'm doing is when there's the middle of winter and there's no sunlight and I don't have access to vegetables and I'm an indigenous person in the Swiss highlands, for instance, I'm collaborating with that animal to take a small amount of concentrated sunlight, grasses and dried grasses that it has eaten, and through 4 stomachs converted into different products, in particular one of those products being milk. I'm using a small amount of that to survive, right? As concentrated sunlight, high vitamin D when there's no sun around. That's very different to what we're doing today. We're drinking milk in the middle of summer. We're drinking it in Southern California with sugar, and it's frozen and it's called ice cream, and it's poor quality, enslaved animals, and the quality of that product is dead finished. It's nothing there for us. And this is causing huge issues with people, and we need to stop doing this. And again, if you do it in that really indigenous way or goat milk, I mean, Gandhi carried a goat with him. There are natural ways of collaborating with animals. And even you look at agriculture, the most sustainable, beautiful, amazing way to collaborate and do agriculture is with animals. Poo is the best thing to use on crops from animals, but also there's a thing called human manure too. And if you can treat it properly, I mean, it's powerful. So don't be freaked out by that. Collaborating with animals is really a way that we've been able to thrive as a species. But now we've stopped collaborating. We've more moved to an in slavery model, right? Lock them up, feed them things they were never designed to eat, fatten them up, extract their young from them, and then pull out this product called milk and then serve it en masse to people. Now, that we need to sort of change our relationship with. Now, if we have any dairy whatsoever, we need to make sure it's organic, grass-fed, high welfare, and ideally fermented like a yogurt or a hard cheese. This means that some of the digestion process has happened. It's easier for us as humans to have some relationship with that food stuff, but generally it's not an ideal product for humans at all. And then we need to think about, well, what are the alternatives? And you and I just created one on the top of the mountain, which is called coconut milk. And we did it in a natural way with a nut that comes from the environment. And we can do that with almond milk. We can do that with cashew milk. We can do that with hemp seeds. They're quite cheap and available, super high in protein, a very nutritious product, high in omega-3, really anti-inflammatory. You mix that with some water, a little bit of salt, maybe a tiny little bit of coconut oil to give it a beautiful, thick, rich consistency in your blender, and you have a delicious homemade nut milk in instance, in a second, with high nutrition and without any of the problems of modern dairy. And so that is a product that I would encourage people to eliminate, and I would encourage them to become more comfortable with finding alternatives. And if at all, on small occasions, they do consume it, be super fastidious about organic, grass-fed, wild, or not so much wild. I mean, it's difficult in the dairy industry, or fermented, ideally fermented, so that it helps that digestive process. And if you think about a product like butter, for instance, which I do use for cooking and I do use in small amounts, the way that it's produced means that it has very low lactase. and lactose, which are the key irritants of dairy. And most modern people, Asians, Caucasians, do not do well on dairy. We don't really have much of a history with it. If you're small tribes that have a close connected history to some dairy cultivation in the Swiss highlands, then you may have the capability to have small amounts of it. But again, it's going to be in that indigenous natural way connected to having a cow in your home. So if you're comfortable having a cow in your home and calves and doing it yourself and waking up in the morning and having small amounts of raw milk, then maybe you'll do okay. But any other form is highly volatile and dangerous, and we need to be super careful about how we integrate or interact with that product.
Thanks, James. And we have to wrap soon, but I couldn't agree with you more. Modern dairy can cause inflammation and suffering inside our bodies, and it certainly causes suffering to those cows with the horrible industrialized and inhuman ways they're treated. Do your body and these animals good and consider cutting modern dairy. And okay then, James, in our imagined scenario, we're in Vanuatu, and we're now back on the one thing it's most known for, those amazing beaches. I hear Champagne Beach is the most famous of them all, and in pictures I've seen, it's got these ridiculously white sands being lapped at by turquoise and sky blue waters. So let's say we're there chilling on Champagne Beach, and it's time to ask you your final most effective step to live long and well.
Great, Brian. I'm happy you chose this location. It is beautiful. This is a non-food component I'm going to finish on here. And this one is something that everyone can practice. It costs nothing. It's super easy. It takes seconds of your time, a few times a day. And that is to eat mindfully. We have become a culture that rushes our food. And this is just funny to watch. And it's funny also when you catch yourself doing it. However, I was taught by a very wise gentleman a process of maintaining or bringing a sense of mindfulness to food consumption. And he taught me a few things about it, and I'm going to share them with you here right now. And there's other people that have taught me about this too. People on Champagne Beach might not look at me sideways when I do this, but on airplanes, they tend to do it, Brian. But before any meal comes out, I just let it sit there for a bit. I'll often smell it a little bit, which is a really powerful first step in the digestive process, because as you smell something, you start to produce saliva. And you start to, then that saliva is the beginning of your digestive juices. And those digestive juices help to start breaking down the food in your mouth as it's going down your digestive tract. And the more effectively we're able to elicit nutrients from our food, i.e. digest efficiently, the more effectively we're able to get what we need from our food and eliminate the stuff that we don't. So if we have impaired digestion, we can eat the best food in the world, but it's not going to work. So in order to improve your digestion, just taking a second before you eat to just a few seconds, smell your food. And then he has me sort of hold my hands out over the food. And you can bring any sort of religious philosophy you might subscribe to into this process. It could be a prayer or something. I tend to hold my hands just sort of towards my food, and I impart a little bit of positive energy onto my food because A, if I make it, I want to charge it with more positive energy. But if I don't make it, potentially someone in the kitchen was having a fight with their wife on their phone and screaming angrily and preparing my food with angst and hate. And look, we know by certain studies that water accumulates energy, and a lot of food is water. So I don't want to get too hairy-fairy, but there could be energy in that food that I don't want. So I sit there with my hands over this food and I just say, thank you. Thank you for this food. Thank you that I have food. Thank you that I even get the opportunity to nourish my cells and my body. I want to give thanks to the farmers, to the earth, to the land, to the bacteria, to everybody that put their love and attention and thoughts into creating this food. And I'm just so grateful that I have this food. And also, Brian, sitting on Honeymoon Beach or in this indigenous culture, there is a lot of food in nature, but it's hard to get food. If your supermarket is the bush, you realize that food production is a fair bit of work. And so to have food prepared for you and delivered to you is a supreme honor and privilege that I think escapes most people. So to give thanks for that, I think really brings you into a state of gratitude, reverence. And when you do that, your breathing slows down. You move into this powerful state of rest, digest, repair, where your body has the state to be able to digest. It's calm. it's in a parasympathetic state, which means it's not running, it's not stressed, it's not in traffic, it's not driving around, it's not screaming to somebody on a phone. It's completely present with the food that's in front of you. And even if that food is subpar, or even if it's the best prepared meal on the planet, bringing this intention to it will help your body build a more powerful exchange and relationship with that food, because of the way that sitting in a peaceful, mindful state before eating and as you eat will help you to extract more of what you need and eliminate more of what you don't need, and give your body and your mind a sense of a meditative approach to food. And this is something that we would witness if we walked from Champagne Beach into the community. People eat in silence, in peace, on the ground with their food, most likely on a leaf. They eat off a leaf as a plate. Zero waste, zero washing up, Brian. Super efficient. You just throw that leaf into the compost pile. This is a powerful message, I think, for people. And if you look at the longest lived people all around the world, the Abkhazians, the Hunzans, the Sicilians, some of the Polynesian tribes, the Icarians, they have long, calm, beautiful, still, relaxed lunches, dinners in very peaceful, with a supreme amount of reverence for their food and for the environment and for their opportunity to commune together over food. So I think let's bring this component back to how we eat. Let's bring the family dinners back, sitting down, TV off, being connected to our food and to the opportunity that we have to eat. So that's what I would love to finish on, and to just help impart to people.
What a beautiful, beautiful way to finish, James. And considering the way we're largely conditioned to eat on the go or in front of some screen while doing something else, this is a most effective we dearly need to take to heart. You mentioned so many reasons for doing so, for eating slowly, intentionally, and with reverence and grace, James. And yet another is something very practical and helpful that research shows it prompts us to eat less, which is also key to longevity.
Absolutely.
Well, James, the sun, it's setting here in our imagined scenario on the beach in Vanuatu, and I really do not want to leave. Believe me, I want to stay here, but it's time to go. And in reality, this conversation really has been as fascinating as Vanuatu must be. So, because after your many years of research, your filmmaking, working with and interviewing so many of the world's other top health and longevity experts, after all that, you were able to share the most effective steps people should focus on to live long and well. I am so grateful. I am so grateful. Everyone listening, first of all, please do order the complete recordings and transcripts of this truly once-in-a-lifetime summit so you can read and listen to that powerful discussion again and hear and read all of the experts' most effective steps whenever and wherever you choose. Your order supports our important mission here and my ability to bring you brilliance, such as James Colquhoun here. And folks, you simply must visit foodmatters.com. You're in for a real treat there in terms of the important podcasts, the great health articles, recipes that are awesome, James films, each and all of which you'll learn about, by the way, from a link at the top of the foodmatters.com website called, surprisingly enough, films. And also do go to foodmatters.com/masterclass for James' latest health class. As you can tell, it's going to be incredibly worthwhile. And James, thank you for all that you have done. You've made the world you truly have a much better place. And I know you're not even finished yet. And thank you for also sharing your brilliance here with us today in Younger, Longer, the Insiders Health Summit.
You're welcome, Brian. It was a pleasure chatting and journeying with you through the Vanuatu archipelago. I hope that you come visit me in person sometime, or some people listening to this might randomly pop up in Port Vila or see me in the marketplace. I've had a few people spot me every now and then before the borders shut. But it'd be an honor to see you here, and I hope that people get to experience this Indigenous culture and reconnect more with what it means to live and eat in an Indigenous way, connected to the planet, which we all are. And we have momentarily forgotten that, Brian, but let's hope that we forget in time before the sixth great mass extinction. Let's hope we can stave that off for a few years and enjoy our time on this beautiful planet. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an honor chatting with you, and I hope that people really enjoyed this.